May the words of my mouth and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Celebrate good times. You know, my wife has a saying for me. Every time I'm at a party or a wedding, she says the same thing to me. It's a little crass, so my apologies for that, but it goes something like this. Every party needs a pooper. That's why we invited you, sir. Party pooper, party pooper. See, I don't really like to party. When the crowds get large and the music gets loud, I just can't seem to get into it. Usually, too, there's alcohol at these things, and I've never really been fond of the taste of alcohol to be all that appealing. In fact, the only time I have ever had a whole glass of beer was when my friends invited me to South Street in Philadelphia for some wings. This restaurant had 10-cent wings, and I was happily gobbling down every single wing that I could. But the first one, when I sat down at the table, I ate it really fast. And what I didn't know was that bowl of wings was the hottest set of wings on the table. The waiter was nowhere to be found, and the only thing available to drink in that moment were the pitchers of beer on the table. So down it went, and quickly. But the only reason I drank that glass of beer was because I felt I had no other choice in that moment. Party pooper, party pooper. Although maybe this is a particular affliction among pastors. Last week, some of you may have attended the St. Patrick's Day Parade in Pearl River. It's one of the largest in the world, and tens of thousands of people attended despite the weather last week. And one of the pastors that I know up there lamented at how miserable the day is. She said she can't stand the noise, the crowds, or that the district gives the next day off from school. Her assumption is that they get the day off so people can recover from the libations from the night before. I don't know if that's actually true or not, and I'll leave you to decide for yourself, but I am keenly aware of the pattern I see over and over again. The community, our neighbors and friends party through the night, and the religious types scowl in protest. Yet, Jesus always seemed to be found at parties. In the Gospel of John, we see Jesus at a wedding. Certainly this would have been a big festive party. The wine is running low, and Jesus' mother tells the servants there, whatever he tells you to do, do it. So Jesus tells them to fill up big stone jars with water, just plain old water, and serve it to the host. When the host tastes it, it's not water anymore. This is wine. And not just plain old wine. This is the very best wine they've had at the party. In the Gospel of Luke, there is this moment where Jesus seems to be complaining about the people around him and the generation he must endure. He points out that the religious leaders completely rejected John the Baptist, who fasted and lived a very strict lifestyle. John the Baptist is noted for wearing camel hair, not very comfortable clothing, and eating locusts and honey. Clearly, he was one not to party. And the religious people rejected him. But Jesus came in very much the opposite vein. Jesus was feasting, going to parties and hanging out with the people who had bad reputations. It seems clear to me that Jesus drank alcohol with them, and the religious types called Jesus a lush or a wine bibber because they didn't like the people he hung out with. And they didn't like that he wouldn't play by their rules about what the holy life ought to look like. Perhaps we religious folks have gotten too far away from this important spiritual discipline. Perhaps when we fight against parties and celebrations, we are fighting against Jesus himself. Well, this is our sixth and final discipline, the discipline of celebration. I think for some of us, it might seem strange to present celebration as a discipline, but clearly for some, it's difficult to celebrate. It's actually a chore to get out there and have a party. So I'm here to remind you today, even if you're the cranky religious type like me, that celebrating is good. In fact, I would dare say that even the bad holidays, the ones that seem frivolous or are currently celebrated in ways you just don't like and you can't get behind it, even those ones, you should take them and redeem them. Find a worthwhile way to celebrate. Find a different way to say yes to enjoying time with friends and family. A way to say yes to something that can be made better by your participation. Let me share with you an example of what I mean. There was this girl by the name of Katie Hosking. She had decided to break up with her fiancé. Now that's a difficult enough thing to go through. But she had broken up with her boyfriend after only 12 days before the wedding was to take place. Katie and her parents had reserved a country club for the reception with 150 invited guests. The cost was thousands of dollars, and club policy required 60 days notice for any cancellation. That meant the family had to pay the full amount no matter what. Did they weep and mourn the loss? No way. They had the party anyways. In place of wedding guests, Katie and her parents invited the residents of the Interfaith Family Shelter to the country club banquet. More than 50 close friends joined 40 homeless people, and together they danced, ate roast beef, salmon, shrimp cocktail, fettuccine, and fruit. They broke out strawberry shortcake to replace the wedding cake, and afterwards they packed up the leftover food and sent it back to the shelter. It was enough to feed those poor families for several more days. Now, that's how you turn a bad situation into something worth celebrating. And what a great thing that they served the poor and hungry. But the real question for all of us is answering why we should celebrate. Plenty of people think it's good to turn a bad situation into a good one, and to help those that are less fortunate, and to celebrate at different times throughout the year. But what is uniquely Christian in how we celebrate? What makes what we do different from everybody else? That's where this morning's passage comes in. Jesus rides into Jerusalem on a humble donkey. He is at the height of his fame as a respected rabbi and teacher, and the disciples start crying out, "Blessed is the King." They lay their coats on the ground and wave palms in the air as a royal welcome to Jesus. They are celebrating the pilgrims coming for Passover. It's the biggest celebration of the year, with families coming from around the world. And the disciples are right there to sing and dance and party. They are ready for this momentous occasion. They recognize that the King is here. That Jesus has come into the capital country. And what do the grumpy religious leaders say? They tell Jesus to stop his disciples from reveling. stop them from shouting out praise to God. So I wonder, who are you today? Are you like the religious leaders trying to stomp out the merrymaking? Or are you like the disciples of Jesus who recognize that God is present? God is here, and it's time to celebrate. You see, when Christ is present, it really is time to rejoice. Christ is here. Christ is with us. He's here in our church. He's active in our lives. It's such good news that we can't help but celebrate. The spark of the divine lies within each one of us. And because of it, there is only one appropriate discipline to exercise: the discipline of celebration. Too much of the world lives a ho-hum existence, stuck in the mundane. But really, we live in a world where every day Jesus is here, present in our lives. Here's what that means. It means a birthday party is just a birthday party. It's mundane. It's ordinary. It's secular. Until, that is, you see the presence of God there in your midst. It's mundane until it becomes a celebration of life with God in the very middle of it. Now you've got a sacred event with a holy God at its center. It's that recognition that God lives in each one of us, and we should celebrate Him at every opportunity we get. You know, talking is just a mundane thing. It's mundane until the conversation is centered on Christ and the work He does in each one of our lives. Now you've got a sacred event we call preaching. In the same way, eating bread and juice is mundane. At least it is until you invoke God's presence and do it in front of the church. Then we call it communion, a sacred and holy event. When we understand our divine nature and God's presence in our lives, the world around us becomes sacred space where God lives and moves. This is truly worth celebrating. This is the reason behind what the disciples did. They saw that God is present. Jesus has come into His kingdom, and He lives in each of our hearts. So let's celebrate. Let's party every chance we get because God is alive. God lives in me, and He lives in you. We've come now to the end of our Lenten series on spiritual disciplines. I hope you've been encouraged to practice these disciplines more in your own life. And by that, I don't necessarily mean carving out a chunk of your day to quietly exercise spiritual disciplines. Instead, I hope you're finding sacred space in your everyday life, in your ordinary activities where God can be present and you can strengthen your relationship with Him. Let's be people with deep roots. Roots that go deep into the best soil there is for us. Roots that go deep into Jesus Christ. Amen? Amen. Amen. At this time, I'd like to transition, and this is